It really is heart-centered, where it's, I know something that not everybody knows. I've been trying to scream it to the roofs. I'd love to get it out in this platform too. And, if people are interested, great. They'll jump on my mailing list to learn more about what I do.
This is Rebel Therapist, a podcast for entrepreneurs who are trained as therapists and who want to level up their businesses, make a bigger impact, feel fulfilled, and be very well paid. I'm your host, Annie Schusler. How do you grow an email list? Having a list of subscribers who are into what you're doing is a huge game changer in your business. If you're selling a course or a membership or a workshop series or really any kind of scaled offer, you want an email list. I know my own email list needed to hit at least 600 people before I was making a significant income in my business. I still have a relatively small list of just over 2,000 people as I'm recording this. I say that to say you don't need a huge list to make a good living, but you do need a list of people who want your stuff. If you're working on getting your first 1,000 subscribers or your next 1,000, you're going to want to hear this conversation. My guest is Anya Manes, an educator and coach who helps parents have open communication with their kids so they can talk about sex and relationships. She's grown an email list of 8,000 people. Now, if you Google how to grow an email list, you might find some helpful resources, but you're also going to find some pretty icky tactics there that probably won't resonate with you. An email list that was grown with those kinds of tactics is not the kind of email list you want. You want a list that you grew by offering value. That's exactly what Anya has done. Welcome, Anya. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So can you tell us, what is the movement that your business is part of and why is it important to you?
I don't know if my movement has a title, but I would say that at least in my part of the country, and perhaps worldwide, there is a desire on the part of parents to raise their children with a less shamed view and a more open learning experience around sexuality. People who said, I don't want the way that I grew up to be what happens for my children. And so that is a very, liberal point of view, that we should be guiding children and holding their hand and giving them a very sex positive outlook. But also it's tempered with restrictions. Not every sex positive outlook supports porn, for example. And so there's, interesting nuances where how do we support this sex positivity and this curiosity while at the same time informing and keeping it healthy? So how do we restrict in the ways that will foster positive growth and at the same time support that positive growth? So, there's a lot of questions around this because it's not what we had when we were growing up. And so we have some research, but people are still figuring it out.
Yeah. You've mentioned before that you didn't get this kind of education, or you didn't get to have these kinds of conversations when you were growing up.
No, this is not what my parents did with me. Although perhaps if they had had kind of this movement happening at the time, they might have chosen it. So I think this is relatively new. It's our generation, and it's coming from nurses, it's from sex ed teachers, it's coming from therapists. There's a lot of voices starting to come in, and we're kind of picking and choosing, who's got something. Does the human sexuality PhD person have something? Does the therapist have something? How can we actually cobble this together and create the sort of best practices for how to raise kids so that they don't have shame, so that they are not scarred, so that they are as sexually healthy as possible?
And I know it's your whole field, and so it's not something you can boil down. But what kind of framework do you think of as being kind of a healthy framework to use with talking to kids?
Well, I think the first important thing to know is that all of their questions and curiosity is normal, and that is okay. There's no little demon popping its head out. The doctor play, even though you told your kids not to do it and they did it anyway, they're not bad. right? And so if we can accept that innocence and accept that this is normal and that evolutionarily speaking, this is fine, right? In terms of psychology, this is fine, then I think it makes it easier to become our child's ally and start to say, okay, if you're totally fine and normal and healthy, how do I just foster the best growth? So I think once parents kind of get out of that rut that they might be in, because often philosophies have been handed down to us and we've been told masturbation is bad or curiosity is bad or this or that or this other thing means that you're a bad person. And if we can just overhaul that and say, no, it doesn't. This is normal. Now, what do we do with it? Like, how is my response best? What could I do that would be the very best for me and my child in terms of bringing us closer, in terms of me educating my child in a way that makes sense, in a way that's compatible with our society, but also protective from things like sexual abuse. So how do I cobble all of this together? Because there's lots of competing pressures.
Was there a particular moment that you remember when you realized that you really wanted to build a business around this and serve more people around this?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because I was a classroom teacher and I was working with high school kids, and my students had so many gaps when it came to sexuality and their knowledge. And then I had some students who were dropping out pregnant. It wasn't just, oh, you don't understand something and that's going to create it was, oh, this is getting in the way of your education. You don't need to know what I'm being paid to teach, which at the time was science. You need to know these other things, right? This is actually going to influence your life much more deeply. So when I stepped out of the classroom and started looking at the research myself to try to figure out what creates the best outcomes, that's when I realized that I would have a much larger impact if I could help parents do this in their own homes and be their child's lifelong ally. That would go a lot further than me trying to reach individual kids.
Beautiful. And you have an email list of 8,000 people.
Yes, at the moment.
So that makes it really clear that you were right, that parents are really hungry for this and, needing this information and needing to have these conversations. How have you built that email list? How have people found you?
Well, at first, I just putting it out wherever I was connected. So if I was in a parenting group in Facebook, I'd toss it out that I was doing a webinar. And my very first webinar on kind of a what to say when timeline got 50 people subscribing to it. And I was like, oh my God, 50 people that I don't know, right? Very, very exciting. So at the time, it was small things like that gave me the juice to keep going. And then I realized, okay, people are asking me to come and speak to parents directly in a workshop format. PTAs are bringing me in, or mothers groups are bringing me in. And so I wanted a way to capture those, so I'd pass around a sign-in sheet. And I'd say, I'd love to send you some free stuff, more resources. If you give me your email, I will send it to you. And so I started building it just literally in that contact that happens through workshops and webinars. And at some point, I realized that I was going to get a lot further with my own education on this topic, because like I said, I didn't start here. I started as a teacher. If I started interviewing other people who'd been doing this a long time. And by this, I mean tackling this question of what are the best practices. They weren't necessarily working with parents. Some of them were researchers who were studying what's the effect of pornography on adolescents. Some of them were people who, were doing child abuse prevention, specifically sexual abuse prevention. Some of them were people who had written books, on this or that topic about connecting with kids or creating ongoing conversations. So I started to cobble people together, and I put together an interview series. And that first interview series was completely free on the internet. I think that maybe people listening to this have participated in some of these online interview series now, but at the time they were not super common because this was 5 years ago. And so mine was specifically talking to kids about sex. Let's get a whole bunch of experts who can tell us how to talk to kids about sex. And we'll talk about how to talk with toddlers and how to talk with elementary school kids and how to talk with preteens and teens, how to talk about pornography, how to talk about predators, like the gamut. So it certainly had enough potential to fill up many interview slots. And so I did 30 experts over 30 days. And that generated about 3,000 people signing up and following that interview series.
Okay, interesting. So then and I know this was 5 years ago and things are always changing, but I'm thinking one thing that doesn't change is that when you're offering value that is really in line with what people are looking for, that brings people to you. So did that happen, that 3,000, did that partly happen because the folks who you were interviewing were also sharing with their folks?
Yes. Yeah, that was part of the deal, that I would promote and they would too.
Good. Okay. So this makes me think of like online summits in general. And I don't know about you, Anya, but I think of it as there are some really gnarly ones and there are some great ones. And I think people who are the attendees are really starting to see the difference. And so what you were doing was really adding value, bringing in the experts who you knew would bring the most value, and then having everybody share it. And I'm imagining they would want to share it because they're excited about this. And then there are these other summits that kind of become mostly about marketing, and they are just kind of a way to bring people onto everybody's list and do a bunch of pitches, but they're not so much bringing value. So I just want to name that as like, so you did this, and I'm thinking the reason it worked, and definitely the reason it would work in 2020 to do something like that, is because it was bringing value.
Yes, I think that you have to find a niche, right? A corner that hasn't already been done to death. Because if it's another summit on marketing, then I don't know that anybody's really going to pay attention. My niche was brand new. Talking to kids about sex was something that had never been done before. And I know another woman who specifically did toddlers. Let's talk about toddlerhood and everything you need to know about toddlers, right? And she has had tremendous success with her summits. It really is heart-centered, where it's, I know something that not everybody knows. I've been trying to scream it to the roofs. I'd love to get it out in this platform too. And, if people are interested, great. They'll jump on my mailing list to learn more about what I do.
Yeah. And for me, I don't think that it necessarily has to be a new thing, but it does have to be something from a new point of view, at least. And it's got to be, like you said, heart-centered and valuable.
I'd say if you think the interview was crap, it probably was, and I think that my audience feels that even if they're new to this, they'll get a sense of who really had a nugget or 10 for them versus who was kind of just yammering on.
Uh-huh. Absolutely. Hey, since we're talking about email lists, are you on my email list? If you want to get in on what I'm sending out every Tuesday morning, sign up. Go over to rebeltherapist.me. At the bottom of the page, you're going to see an image of me writing you an email with a spot to sign up. I'll tell you about the latest podcast episode I'm releasing, my thoughts about business, and how you can work with me. All right, let's get back to Anya. Okay, so you brought in a bunch of people in that way. And then what else? What else has brought people to your email list?
Well, I continued to do all of those. I do workshops every year, lots of them. And I guess I thought people need a reason to sign up. People really guard their inboxes. They don't want to sign up for a whole bunch of things that they don't need. So I would go to these schools to present, and I would start talking to the audience and telling them my story and how I got started and what motivates me. And at some point I'd say, and hey, there's a sign-in sheet where you can put your name and your email address. And so something I would do in those presentations is I'd hold up the children's books that I have read and vetted, because not all of them are great, but there are a lot of really good ones. And I'd say, this is a book you could use to start to talk to your child about pornography. Here is a book you could use. You could read this to your small child to start to teach them about private parts and about sexual abuse prevention strategies. And so as I'd be holding up these books, I'd say they're on the back table. I brought my mini backpack, my mini library, and go back there and flip through them. And you don't need to take photos of all these books or write down all the titles. I've got that, right? Let me email you the books list. You're struggling talking to your kids about this. Let me give you an easy strategy. And let me make it even easier for you. Let me send you the books list. And so that gives you a reason to sign up. And, not everyone would still, of course, but most people would sign up on that list. And then I was regularly getting another influx of 50 here and 50 there and another 50 there, right? Even if I emailed them and said, hey, do you want that free follow-up conversation? And no one took me up on it, I was still adding to my list.
And how are you over time nurturing that list? How often are you emailing them?
Well, before the pandemic and life turned upside down, I was emailing them every week. Sometimes more often if more stuff was happening. In general, I was trying to send out my own articles or my own resources. I tended to send them something that I thought was valuable, something meaty, something that didn't just feel like an advertisement. If I was on someone else's summit and I had to promote it, because I understand how that goes, I get interviewed for summits all the time, then okay, I could send that to my list, but that wasn't like the main course. I wanted them to get their main course every week. And so if I could possibly swing it, I'd give them something that I thought was of high value every week, and then the other stuff on the side.
So Anya, I know we're in the shelter in place time right now.
Yeah.
So that you could answer this basically either way, if you want to answer it for during the pandemic or the other times in your life. How do you spend a typical day, including any morning rituals that really help you to be productive and focused?
Okay, when I was productive and focused would be before the pandemic.
Okay, so let's go there.
Let's go there.
Yeah. I
have a small child. My daughter is 4.5 now. And so for the life of my business, I've been managing her and the business. It's been pretty much 50-50, And so what helped me be really productive was having childcare, first and foremost. Without childcare, I found it impossible. Literally impossible. So at first it was a nanny who would come by and spend just a few hours a day. And so my morning ritual really was, getting whatever needed to be done so that she transitioned to the nanny or to the daycare or to whatever was happening, to preschool. And then after that was when my time started, which I'd usually start with a meditation. I'm big on meditation. I think that it helps me tremendously to stay calm and focused. And so the meditation was probably the most essential part of that routine. But then I would settle in. Often it was at a cafe, because if I dropped my daughter off at preschool, I could drive all the way home, but I could also drive up the street and be in a nice, lovely internet cafe where they would give me food and drinks, right? And so then I could settle in with my computer and do whatever needed to be done. So I found that was helpful, having a second place, not home, because if I'm at home, I'll be like, oh, maybe I'll make a nice breakfast, or maybe I'll take care of those dishes, and I get sidetracked off of the work. And so housework is productive, but I wasn't making strides in the business.
I love the way you just put that. They can make you something to eat. They can make you a drink. It's like getting taken care of while you work.
Right. It feels a little bit luxurious. It's not my own home office kind of thing, but it's someone else is taking care of my child. I'm close by, so I don't have a commute to go pick her up. It just felt like my car's in the parking lot. It's not going to get ticketed. I'm in San Francisco, so that's like that's real huge thing, yeah. Finding parking.
Yeah.
So, I was just like, if I go to the cafe, I get to sort of, relax and enjoy the music and, set up things the way that I want to do them. And that's how I was really able to write a blog post every week. Without that, I don't think it would have happened.
Anya, is there a piece of advice that you would give your former self, the you that was just getting ready to start this business?
I think it would be to follow the value and to follow what people are asking for, which I think I did, because I was a little clueless and I didn't know what to do next. And I was like, you've got an idea. You want that? Okay, I'll try. But I think that what has helped me the most is kind of giving people a menu and saying, well, I could do this and I could do that. And this is something that I offer. And then letting other people's enthusiasm come my way. And when they would come my way and say, oh, I really want you to come and speak to the Girl Scouts about puberty, I'd be like, could I put that together? I could do that, And so if I'm serving them in the way they wish to be served, which isn't necessarily pricing things the way they wish it was priced, right? I mean, but offering the value that they're asking for, then I think that has been most successful. So when they say, I'm really struggling with how to teach my child great boundaries, I don't know how to model that myself. Okay, that's a place to focus. That's something that is wanted and needed out there. And if you're actually able to voice that to me, there's 50 other people who will think that's also a great idea, but they didn't voice it out loud. So I could at least, write a post or start to talk about that and say, hey, are other people interested in this? And start to gather a group who is.
Yes. So amazing.
Well, it means that I'm not looking over the next year and saying, oh, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Which I could do. I have done that in the classroom and said, here's my curriculum, and I'm going to execute that over the course of many months. Instead, it's really stepping back and doing a lot more listening. And I think that's what I've gotten out of offering those free follow-up calls. They're discovery calls, and so sometimes sales come from them. But more than that, I'm really listening to the people that I'm, considering for my clients, the people I'm nurturing.
Yes. And you're doing market research that's in integrity, and you're aware, for this person who has this need, there are 50 or 50,000 other people with this need. Well,
one thing about teaching boundaries and consent is that there are no high pressure sales. That is completely anathema to consent, right? So manipulating someone or, doing that hard sale, I've done some sales trainings, and pretty much everything they teach is the opposite of consent. So that's not something that I feel like I can do, because then I'm not modeling, then I'm not actually living into what it is that I'm suggesting others do. And people have used some of those tactics on me, and I recognize them. And I still sometimes buy because I want the value. And there are other times when I'm like, you didn't actually have to use that tactic, or times when I've been sold when somebody didn't, where they just continued offering more and more value. And I was like, oh, well, okay, then I'm in. And so maybe I'm an easy sell. I don't know. But I have found that it doesn't work for me to do those high pressure tactics. And maybe that's because of my niche or because I haven't figured out how to do it. But I really just try to help people. That's it. That's my entire sales. And, that's probably also why I'm not the biggest business around.
I don't think that's it, Anya, honestly. But we could have much longer conversations about that. But no, I think offering value absolutely works. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. I hope it's valuable to those who've listened.
You can find out more about Anya at talkingaboutsex.com. I want to thank Cosmo Palms for editing this podcast and Brianne Rising for taking great care of our guest. If you found this episode supportive, please share it with your favorite healer. That's how we can reach more people. Most of all, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time. Yes, it's got to be the damn internet.